Inward investment has been critical to Northern Ireland's economic journey to date, and it's going to be an important driver for future growth and, of course, key to a 10x economy. Indeed, in the last 20 years, InvestNI has worked with over 700 externally owned businesses to help create some 47,500 jobs in Northern Ireland, offering career pathways and upskilling opportunities right across the region, spanning a broad range of sectors. I doubt indeed that there's anyone here today that doesn't have a family or friend working for one of them. And I know that the impact on individuals and families across Northern Ireland inspires the team at InvestNI to seek out opportunities around the world and compete to land them for Northern Ireland. Of course, it's the big job numbers that grab the headlines, but the real impact of inward investment on the local economy runs much, much deeper. Inward investment brings a whole host of benefits to the local economy, from supply chain opportunities, collaboration between international and local businesses, investment in world-class training that enriches the skills pool here that we've just been hearing about, and by creating exciting career opportunities that attract and retain talent in the region, as well as introducing innovative practices and enhancing the international outlook of the region overall. And many, well, they're also deeply committed to contributing to local communities and society here through a range of CSR initiatives, as well as supporting local businesses. So what is it that attracts these investors to Northern Ireland? And what can we learn about their wider impact on the Northern Ireland economy and everyday life here? Well, to find out a bit more, Steve Harper is InvestNI's Executive Director of International and Skills. He's joined by a few of our established inward investors and some new arrivals to explore the attraction and benefits of locating in Northern Ireland and how they are having an impact. So, Steve Harper, if you'd like to make your way to the stage, I'm going to hand over to you at this stage, Steve, and I believe you have a bit of a video to introduce too. So, ladies and gentlemen, Steve Harper.
Well, thank you very much, Karen, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. If I could ask the panellists to maybe take the stage. I have to say I'm feeling very overdressed after Austin. But it is, as he says, wonderful to be out and amongst people again. So as our panellists join the stage, we've got a range of recent investors, more established investors, and some long-time investors. So I have, you want to take a seat? I have right beside me here David Coster, who is the CIO of probably our most recent investor into Northern Ireland, Wolfspeed. Keith Farley, who is the MD of Aflac here, a 2.5-year-old investment into Northern Ireland. Jackie Henry, who is the managing partner of Deloitte. Stephen Mertland, who's the CFO of Fintru. And Charlie King, who is a director for TribeTech. So David, I want to start with you. You're the most recent investor into Northern Ireland that we have. Can you tell us a little bit about Wolfspeed, what you do, why you chose Northern Ireland, and how you're getting on and what you intend to do here?
Sure. Thanks, Steve. Hi, everybody. Wolfspeed is a semiconductor, pure-play, vertically integrated company specializing in high-tech manufacturing. Our products range from power and RF devices that are really focused on fueling and enabling sustainable energy, carbon neutrality, and some of the applications that our technology goes into are things such as battery electric vehicles, aerospace and defense applications, communications infrastructure that's enabling 5G technology, and a number of others. We're based in the US. We're about 3,500 employees, publicly listed on New York Stock Exchange. And what really drove us to seek another location, and ultimately Northern Ireland, obviously as CIO, we were looking to make sure from an IT capability standpoint that as our company was continuing to experience, we needed a place that we could establish as a beachhead for our digital core hub of a number of new technology investments we're making to run our company off of. It became very clear that somewhere in this part of the world was going to be where we needed to focus. I had a planned trip a little bit further south of here, and my good university buddy and I reconnected, and he said, as Belfast's greatest salesman, Northern Ireland's got a lot going on. I think you should really come check it out. And one trip really is what sold us, and super thrilled to be here.
Yeah, it's interesting. An awful lot of companies come to Northern Ireland through referrals. And you two guys went to college, and Keith, you've been here 2.5 years, and David, you decided to come on the back of it, which is fantastic and shows the power of networks, I guess, as well. Jackie, you are managing partner of a firm everyone will know the name of, Deloitte, and who have been in Northern Ireland for many, many years. But you've gone through a period of very rapid growth. Can you maybe talk us through some of that and why that happened in Northern Ireland?
Yes, thanks, Steve. Deloitte, one of what's known as the Big Four professional services firms, and globally the biggest in the world. But the story of Deloitte in Northern Ireland, we date back 32 years, so we date back to 1989. And actually, that was the same year. I think that Deloitte landed in Northern Ireland 1 year before I landed in Deloitte. So I joined Deloitte in 89, 32 years, shift done now. And as a fairly fresh-faced graduate or postgrad at that stage. So I like to think the story of Deloitte in Northern Ireland is actually my story. So the first probably 20 years of that story, we had all of our service lines reflected here, but actually we're pretty static in terms of scale. We're about 100, 150 maybe. We had a few bombs. We had a couple of recessions. We happily then came through into peacetime. And then about 2012, the leadership in Deloitte made the inspired decision to make me the office senior partner in Deloitte in Northern Ireland, and I invited them in here with the help of Invest and I. Many of your colleagues here are still here, and we showed them what was possible in terms of the low-cost economy was quite attractive at that point. But actually, we started just to talk about the magic that we've heard about this morning, and from Catherine and Ivy there, of the genius of our people. They made that first decision with me based probably on that first point, the economics, rather than the second point. But really quickly then we delivered on that second point, and we showed them what good looked like in terms of our people. Also, we persuaded in that very first year the Department for the Economy, and together with Belfast Met, to experiment with us. And we decided to do things slightly differently in attracting graduates. And we asked everyone to roll sleeves up and design with us a reskill retraining model for graduates. Now, the very first one ever was data analytics. We've heard a lot about big data there in that last session. And that model was then adopted. It is the assured skills model that many of us have benefited from since. Since then, we've had over 450 of our people. We're in 20-something academies now. And it's been a wonderful model for us. And we've run academies in robotics, AI, cloud, testing, big data, human capital. And then the second thing we did that following year, because we were hungry then to tap into the rich vein of school leavers, was we buddied up, partnered with Ulster University, and we designed what was the first for Northern Ireland higher level 6 apprenticeship. And that became our Bright Start apprenticeship model. And again, we have over 400 now wonderful Bright Starts in our business who have jobs with us, and many who have now graduated and have a degree in BSc Business Technology. And in fact, the degree outcomes of our last cohort, just amazing. 50% got first class honours and 50% got 2-1s. So it's an amazing model. So I guess in summary, we've scaled hugely, Steve, since that investment decision. We've ambitious plans for growth beyond now, and we continue to commit to Northern Ireland. We've got the exciting new development of the most beautiful yurt building yet to come.
Yeah, so 7 years ago, 8 years ago, you were 100 people. How many have you today in Deloitte?
So we're over 1,000 now, and as I've said, we're really excited to continue to crack on. And it really is, we've heard this thread today, it really is first and foremost about the amazing people that we have here. It is the skills, but also the qualities. It's that grit, the resilience, and not to forget about that brilliant self-deprecating humour that we all have that lands so wonderfully well with our clients and our teams across the globe, and continues to bring ideas and innovate in our business.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful, and for those of you who know the geography of Belfast, Jackie and Deloitte will move into the Yurt, which is right beside the Invest NI office, and that's taking an old, very, very old linen warehouse and with a brand new skyscraper in Belfast terms behind it, which I think marries the old and the new and really sort of replicates the journey that Northern Ireland's been on.
That's right. And actually, the Yurt, and I'll not bore you with the history of the Yurt, but it is amazing. It was that old linen warehouse that has been so poorly neglected and derelict for all those years. And in the late 1800s, it was the powerhouse of the economy and the whole of the island of Ireland, actually. And now for us to be part of bringing that back to life for the future of the economy, the knowledge economy, is just such an important commitment and statement for us. And it was entirely because of the Yurt that I guess that we made that commitment into that building and into that project.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see. Keith, you've been, I guess, in Northern Ireland. Aflac have been established in Northern Ireland for 2.5 years, but your journey to Northern Ireland started a fair bit before that. Can you tell us about that journey to choose Northern Ireland, and a little bit about some of the things that have surprised you as you've set up? I think you've 135 people employed here now.
Yeah, that's right. So Aflac is a health insurance company in the U.S., a Fortune 500 company, and it all started with a call from Andrea Hahian from New York, from Invest NI, down to Columbus, Georgia, and that call led to a meeting, and that led to a visit where Eamon Mulvena picked us up, and he started doing the work from this side. So we had Andrea and Eamon, two very patient people, because as an insurance company, we had a lot of questions. We take our time when assessing risk, and it took us a few years to make the decision. But we looked at 15 different cities globally, including some U.S. locations, and we're blown away with the talent that we saw here, as you hear everyone say. And actually, as Catherine was saying from Allstate, one of the meetings that was a pivotal meeting for us was a meeting with John Healy at Allstate, where he said, we'd heard this quote before, that you come for the savings and you stay for the people. But as we saw what they were doing in Allstate, we realized we've got this thing all wrong. It's not about the savings. It's about the quality talent you just can't find anywhere else. So the savings are just, you almost throw those out. That's just a cherry on top if you find them. And so that really changed our perspective. And so we've grown to 135 people. We had 20 before lockdown, 135 as of today, and are growing to 150, so we're nearly there and well on the journey. And again, we've been amazed with the talent. We have 2 of our cognitive science team members in the States right now. We have 10 of us flying hopefully tomorrow. COVID test at 5. I should be shielding, but I'm doing COVID test at 5, and hopefully all 10 of us make it to the States for next week. And then we have our U.S. president and a small delegation coming the week after. So now, the borders are reopened and we've got travel going, which we're excited to see.
135. Eamon, there's your task, because if he's nearly full, we're going to get some more. But I guess, as Karen said, Keith, earlier on, she said, that the job numbers from FDI grabs all the headlines. And I guess trying to let the audience in this room and the audience who have joined us virtually understand it's not just about the job creation, but it's about what you as an investor bring to Northern Ireland. And I know that Aflac have been probably at the forefront of doing quite a lot of their sourcing. Could you maybe expand on some of that for us, please?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So one of the first strategies that we wanted to implement was what we called our farm to fork strategy, or Ecklinville Distillery said it's grain to glass, and keeping everything kind of local and managing that supply chain. So we hired all local companies as our suppliers and providers, even though we had relationships with large global companies. So our lawyers are near the Albert Clock. Our accountants are right near Inst. Our HR team is in the shadow of the Grand Central. Our benefits are out of Mahrefelt, and our applicant tracking systems out of Port Stewart. So we kind of looked across the province and said, we're not going to use large global companies. We want to use local companies for a local feel. And then when we got to the employees, we found the same thing. And I actually ran the numbers this morning in preparation for this. And only 42% of our employees live in Belfast, and 58% are from the wider province. So our first employee was from Newton Ards. Our second is from Irvinstown. Our third is from Port Glenone. Our fourth was from Newry. And from someone living in the States, it's a relatively small place. This is all within driving distance. I know here it's thought differently. But if you want to set up in the middle of the country, the cost alone to build an island in Lough Neagh is just cost prohibitive. And that's not even counting the kayaks you'd have to buy to get your employees there. So, I think you can set up in Belfast and really recruit as we've done. 58% of our people are from outside Belfast. And I think it has that wider impact. We look at this as not a Belfast company, but a Northern Ireland company.
Yeah, and it's interesting because sometimes we have to check ourselves because we kind of claim Aflac as a Northern Ireland company because that's how you've portrayed it, and sometimes forget it's a massive US company.
I have to remind myself sometimes too. Yeah, we are based in the US, but a lot of the neatest stuff is happening here.
Thanks, Keith. Stephen, you are CFO at Fintrue. We hear a lot about investors who come to Northern Ireland, and the figure of 73% of those investors go on to reinvest. And Fintrue, to my mind, falls firmly in that regard. Can you maybe tell us about how you've grown your business here and what your first intentions were when you came to Northern Ireland?
Absolutely. Thanks, Steve, and thanks very much, Invest NI and the Minister, for the invite today. Fintrue's journey started 2013. It was really an idea that we can provide services to investment banks, we can solve their regulatory problems, and we can do them in a near-shore location. So we're taking the work from high-cost jurisdictions like London, areas like that, and put it in a near-shore, somewhere easily commutable that we can travel in on a day. So at the time, Fintrue had the opportunity. It could have placed the work anywhere. It was a startup company. It was really only an idea. But Invest NI really believed in the idea and supported that from the outset, and really wrote our first business plan 2014 for initially 80 people. That was such a success. We went again and again. So ultimately, 8 years down the line now, Fintrue's now 1,000 people. We still remain a Northern Ireland-based company. And client demand remains very, very strong. So it has been testament to the business model and how it's developed over time. The other part I would just want to speak to really is the cost benefit. Again, people have said, the initial idea was we'll get it to a lower cost base. But again, as everybody has spoke to, the talent in Northern Ireland has spoke for itself. And we are now moving up the value chain where our staff are now recognised as being more skilled than our clients and recognised for that, and in such demand that the clients keep coming back for repeat business. So essentially Fintrue has, it's been mutually beneficial, Invest NI and ourselves, and it's something in demand is sufficient that we want that to continue, so we do. So very positive.
So you came in initially with an intention for a very small team here in Belfast. Can you give us some of those numbers of what your initial intentions were and where you are today?
Yeah, and the initial business plan, it's out there. It was 80 people back in 2014, so that was delivered fairly quickly. It created, the clients stepped forward. They recognised the proposition that we had on offer. We went again for another 160 people, in 2017, and then 2018 was the big announcement. We did another 605 jobs. That was a pivotal piece for us as well, because those 605 jobs, half of those were Belfast, half of those are in the northwest, where we have again seen the talent pool there, and that's really stepped forward and created a great opportunity for us up there. We now have 300 staff in our northwest offices, which are, it's really testament to the talent up there as well. So it is.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing story about how you landed with a small project and just have grown right across Northern Ireland. I guess, Stephen, we're talking about today's being the kind of the first meeting back and having a nice conference. We've all been affected by a pandemic. How has that affected, and how has that affected Fintrue, and how do you expect your working practices maybe to have changed going forward?
Yeah, no, it's a very relevant question, Steve. In terms of how we worked before, we were very much office-based. We saw the pandemic came, we got everybody home safely. That was our major priority there. We had everybody working from home for the last 2 years. They still remain to the vast majority of the time working from home, but what we are offering our staff is a fully hybrid model. the staff, they responded to us. They say we want 1 or 2 days a week in the office. They want to collaborate. They want to create those relationships. They want to innovate. So what Fintree is now doing, we're now repurposing in our offices to make them collaborative, to make them these spaces where people can come and be inspired and join up socially and create the relationships that then they can take back to their hybrid working model. And they've been very productive over the last 2 years from home. Just continue that. It's not broken, but it needs to evolve, because people's careers, their relationships, their know-how, they need to get out of the silos and create those again, and re-establish those, so that they can make the next step and the next phase of the transformation, as we'll talk to.
Cheers, thank you. Charlie, great to see you again.
Good to see you too.
So you are running a business called TribeTech, and you decided to invest in Northern Ireland in August of last year. Can you tell us a little bit about TribeTech, what you do? Because what you do is slightly different from the other four we have here.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. We're the world's first manufacturer of autonomous drill rigs. So we're an automation-focused original equipment manufacturer. So we look at problems that industry's having and design equipment to solve those needs. And traditionally, in kind of very challenging environments where they need to be really robust and built to a very high caliber, which again plays well to the skill sets available here.
And what are your future plans? So you're based outside of Belfast. You've got a new facility. Why did you choose where you are? And tell us a wee bit more about that.
Yeah, I think with the shipbuilding history, and in Antrim, Belfast, there was traditionally a lot of heavy industry and heavy manufacturing, which has been dialing back for a number of reasons. We've found an amazing depth of talent there, but we're recruiting there, and a lot of the team are local to there, Antrim, North Down, but with our supply chain, there's 14,000 components in our machine, and we've got stuff being made in sheds from Clarendon to Cullybackey and everywhere in between.
So your supply chain, was that one of the reasons with Northern Ireland's experience in the minerals processing industry that attracted you to Northern Ireland to come here?
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of those companies that gave me the idea to look here in the first place. I saw, mining equipment being made in Tyrone, and I was like, huh? I look and saw exactly why.
Later on this afternoon, we're going to have a session on the diaspora of Northern Ireland. And despite your accent, you're originally from here. And does it feel nice to give something back to your home country?
Absolutely. Out of our board of directors, which are half here, half in Australia, we've only got one person who doesn't have Irish heritage. So I think for everybody in the company, it's great to be bringing jobs and opportunity home, and something we're all really proud of.
Thanks, Charlie. Jackie, you're Deloitte's People and Purpose lead, and obviously Deloitte have got some amazing initiatives in diversity and equality. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of those practices that you're bringing into Northern Ireland and some of the things you want to achieve here?
Yes, thanks, Steve. The first thing I'd say on diversity is, it is that it's not just the right thing to do. It is actually about building a brilliant business. So we know that diversity of thought brings together the best eclectic, amazing mix of people that create the most interesting solutions to our clients. So that's why it's really important. And you're right, in Deloitte in the UK then, I've been in the UK leadership role for People and Purpose for the last year, which again is an incredible privilege for me. So delivering on that diversity and is about making sure that Deloitte is a really open place and welcoming place for people regardless of their background, religion, gender, sexuality, or disability, neurodiversity, whatever their mix of backgrounds might be. So, so a few things, I guess, that have made me most proud, probably in delivering on that in Northern Ireland. So it's about showing up and making that clear that our doors are open and we're a welcome place. So from, I guess, a long time ago, being one of the first corporates to get out there and in Pride Parade and stand with the banner when there weren't that many walking through the city streets, through to being one of the first to sign the request and the action for marriage equality, and then through to things like our Bright Start apprenticeship, which gives opportunity for young people across Northern Ireland and their parents actually to come in and for them to have a job in Deloitte and fully funded apprenticeship where they may not have that privilege or opportunity to go to university full time. So that's a few examples. But then the other part of the challenge is inclusion. So once we attract those amazing eclectic mix of people, how do we make sure that they stay and they have that sense of belonging, and not just that, but they can thrive and progress within Deloitte. So we have the wraparound here of our networks. So we have networks to support, create communities of support, but importantly, we listen really carefully to those networks. So for instance, at the minute, we have our networks helping us really to design out our hybrid working approach and model, and also through to the design out of that amazing yurt building that we talked about. So really listening to them to make sure that we build their preferences into how we deliver on our strategy. And then, as well as that, continue to action hard. So just last month, we announced fully flexible bank holidays. So we have lots of people, different backgrounds and mixes who want to take different days and not necessarily the set days. So that's a good example, I think, of something we landed which said, do you know what, it's actually up to you. You can take your bank holiday on the bank holiday, or you can do it whenever you want actually, and make it real. So it's about keep putting the actions in place to deliver on these things.
That's brilliant. David, does that, I know you've got some in your very early stage, and I know some of your team are here today, but does that resonate with you and what you want to do here in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. So it's really part of some core cultural traits of our company. Diversity, inclusion, equality is something that we really try to walk the walk on, and definitely something that we aimed to achieve when we came here. Very excited that our site lead is our first hire and our first diverse hire. And with the hires that we've made, we have 3 full-time employees now, with a couple more on the way, just waiting for the start dates to get here. We're at 50% diverse, and it's something that we're just simply committed to because it's the right way to build a business. And we also believe that diversity of thought, diversity of skill set, diversity of thinking, diversity of life is just critically important.
And I guess, Charlie, I'm keen to go back to you because you were telling me outside about, and we heard, I think, on one of the earlier panel sessions about the company would be at double the size if they could get more welders. You were telling me about some plans you have for welding.
And other trades. We're really keen on getting more women into heavy industry. We've seen this happen in Australia. The tier 1 mining companies have really driven getting women into the mining industry. 10, 11 years ago when I first arrived on a mine, you never saw a woman unless they were a cleaner, and some of these mines are now up to 50% female across all levels of the business, right up to CEOs, board members, etc. So it can be done, but I think it's about changing that attitude. You've got to recruit harder, put more time into it, and try and make it attractive and a supportive environment. And it's something we're really excited about. We know it's not going to be an easy journey for us to get 25% female right across the business as a heavy engineering manufacturing company, but it's something we're really excited about the challenge for.
Yeah, and I think that's actually something Northern Ireland does really well in terms of the higher level apprenticeships, and this word of mouth, I guess, for the students and for the parents, and we see more and more females looking to go into the higher level apprenticeships in engineering and get their degree that way and go through, and I think your plans are brilliant. We've got a few minutes left. Keith, I want to come back to you. And some of the people in this room will have heard the story, but I want you to tell the story because it's entertaining, but I think it encapsulates Northern Ireland, about your boss coming across and his suitcase being left in the States. And could you just share that little anecdote with the...
Yeah, I'd be happy to do it. So our first trip over here was the first week of December in 2016, and while Virgil Miller made it, his suitcase did not. And he likes to travel comfortably, so he had jeans and a t-shirt. And the next morning, we were going to Stormont to meet with the First Minister and Deputy First Minister. And so we checked into the hotel. We're staying at the Merchant, and it's probably 5:30 on a Tuesday or Wednesday. And we said, is there anywhere that we could get a suit now? And they said, well, you could go down to Ann Street, go towards Victoria Square, and there's Bogart, and they might be able to sort you out. So we go over to Bogart, and now it's 5:45, and the shutter's half closed. But there was a customer still in there, so that's why it was only half closed. And we knocked on the door, and they let us in. And Stephen took care of us. They didn't know that they knew we were American for a billion reasons, but they didn't know why we were here. So we said, we're looking for a suit. Could you sort us out? Could you do anything? And Virgil's quite broad-chested, but doesn't have the height to match the shoulders all the time. So it was going to need to be tailored a bit. And but it's now 6:15. They're past closed, but they're staying open for us. And Stephen, the guy there, said, listen, I'll take it home with me. There's a lady 5 or 6 houses down that does some tailoring. I'll get it tailored for you. And what time's your meeting tomorrow? And we said, well, Eamon and team are picking us up at 7:30. He said, I'll be there at 6:45 with your suit. I said, well, what time do you guys open? He said, we don't open until 9, but I'll get a coffee or something in between. So he came in, and there was the suit, and Virgil got dressed, and we had a great meeting. And Virgil, who's in charge of all of our customer service at the company at the time, said, if this is a place where people treat strangers like that, then this is a place where you want to set up a customer-focused business. So the Bogart story. Since then, I made 7 more trips before moving over here. Every trip I bought a shirt from them. Now they're the official clothier of Aflac Northern Ireland. And I continue. I took David there to buy a Barbara Rain wax jacket. He was going to buy it somewhere else. I said Bogart's the place. So yeah, it's things like that. And for that one story, there's 10 more just like it of a situation. Just another quick one. Right across, there's the Belfast Clipper that cuts hair. Right across from the Merchant, and I went in there one time, and he only takes cash, and I only had dollars. I was on a visit, and I didn't have any sterling. And he said, I said, well, where can I get cash? He said, just get me next time. By the looks of your hair, it's going to grow back, and you're going to need another cut. Get me next time. And I was a visitor, so I went to an ATM and paid him. I couldn't leave a debt, but that was the attitude. Just give me next time. You'll be back. That hair's going to keep growing. So that's what we saw here, and it was really impressive.
Yeah, listen, I don't know how we top that, but it's great. I think it encapsulates all that's good in Northern Ireland, in the big numbers of FDI coming in here. It is the reach that your companies have right throughout Northern Ireland, and the good that you bring in. So it's wonderful. Thank you for your time.